All right, everyone, welcome back to another edition of The Hot Fix. Today, we've got a special speedrun showcase as part of Disability Awareness Month, and we're going to be featuring a speedrun by Star Pilot 87, who's going to be running Ace Combat 6. As a reminder, throughout the month of October, we'll be featuring speedrunners by disabled runners to help promote the Able Gamers Foundation. And if you'd like to participate, there is a chat command, !disability month, you can type in to get a form to submit your interest. Before we get started, we do have a few quick announcements. The games list for AGDQ 2020 is going to be released later this week on the 6th, followed the day after by the first wave of registration on October 7th. You can go to gamesdonequick.com for more information on both of those. And tomorrow, we're going to have Titanfall 2 being run at 5:30 Eastern, followed immediately by the first episode of The First Step, which is also going to be about Titanfall 2. So make sure you tune in for that tomorrow. And why don't we look over at the people we have on today? Star Pilot, Maxis on Fire, Kitsune. How are you all doing today?
Pretty good.
Yep,
I'm
alright.
Well, thank you.
So Ace Combat is a game that I don't think we've really showed off on GDQ before. Why don't you give us the quick lowdown on what we're going to see today?
Well, Star Pilot is a pretty talented speedrunner of the game, I'd say. I think I was the first person to put a leaderboard time up at like 1 hour and 55 in New Game Plus or something, and then Star Pilot comes along about 5 months ago and says, "Oh, I'm going to start running this game." Takes it pretty seriously and cuts about 20 minutes off it, and he's currently holding the record. What you're going to see is a action flight simulator, I suppose it would be fair to say, with a lot of very wild futuristic technology and high drama. Don't know if you guys have got anything to add, Star Power, anything you want to say about the run before we get going?
Nope.
All right. Is there anything else you'd like to preface before we get going, or just get started on the run?
I think we should be able to explain things as we go along.
All right. So let's switch this over to some game feed. And I'm ready to start when you are. So why don't you give us a countdown, Star Pilot?
Okay. 3, 2, 1, go.
Okay, so we're going to be jumping pretty much straight into the first mission. There's a lot of cutscene activity and storyline that's laid out in the cutscenes in this game, obviously, all of which we'll skip where possible. There's a lot of stuff which is told throughout kind of the voiceovers, etc., the dialogue that happens throughout the missions, but we'll try and kind of keep vaguely atop of that, as well as talking about what's going on through the game. Pretty much jumping straight in, you can see standard fare for Ace Combat games. The targets which you need to kill to complete the mission are highlighted with their names in red, a little target there. The ones that aren't, the ones that are in green are enemies that you don't need to kill to complete the mission, and the ones that are blue are your allies. Kitsune, anything you want to say about kind of introducing the lore of this game?
Well, the game starts with the country of Slovakia trying to take over Grace Maria.
Go on.
As far as the first mission's concerned, they give you bombers to really familiarize yourself with the game, because they're basically bullet sponges, and they move slowly, so they're easy to hit with the missiles.
Yeah, so at the start of the game, you're pretty much straight in. In the opening cutscene, what you would have seen if this wasn't a speedrun, if you were playing it casually, was that there is a huge, by surprise, air attack on this capital city of Imeria. Loads of fighters coming in at once, loads of bombers coming to fly in to mess everything up. Later on in the mission, I believe you'd see the first cruise missile attack, which is kind of a central theme of the antagonists of the game, that they use this cruise missile weapon, which you'll see a lot more of later on.
Yep, that'll be coming up in a moment.
So what Star Pilot's doing at the moment essentially these the sets of spawns on most of the missions in the game, if not all of them, are predetermined. So it's either once you've triggered it by killing a certain number of enemies or getting a certain amount of time into the mission, those kinds of things. New enemies will start spawning. If you know where they are, you can get to them in advance, and as soon as they appear as targets, you can take them out. That's the best way to kind of advance these levels faster.
So Star Pilot's being attacked by these horrifying missiles. Big explosions. Oh man.
Yeah.
So right now he's setting up. When he's told to run. He's setting up so that he can turn really quickly and exit the levels to save time.
The end of this is supposed to be still kind of the introduction mission to the game, I suppose. There's a lot of stuff being explained to you throughout it, and here at the end you basically have to... There's lots of other things that you can go up and fight in the city, but since we're doing a speed run, we don't need to do any of the optional things. So what Star Pilot's doing is just flying north-south along the boundary of the level, where obviously we know in advance that the end of the level is going to happen. You have to evacuate the city and cross a line. He's just dodging cruise missiles whilst waiting to do that. Something that you won't see too much, you might see a little bit of right now. Won't see too much of yet. Is the... I don't know if it's completely unique to Ace Combat 6, but it's certainly not in any of the other ones I've played. The allied cover and allied attack features, where you can tell your wingman and like your squadron to make certain attacks across the field. So, and you can see this bar on the bottom of the screen there that's got kind of 5 green segments. Each time one of those gets full, you can issue a command to your allies on the battlefield. You can tell them to target a group of enemies that you want attacking, or you can tell them to get all the enemies that are on your tail off your tail. That's something that will come in particular use later on in the game against certain enemies that are quite hard to chase down with the various weapons that you take out on the different missions. And excuse me, just like that, we're at the end of the first mission already.
I think that was introduced in 5, but it wasn't limited to a bar system. You could just tell them to switch the commands whenever you felt like it.
It was the commands were a bit more diverse in 5 and 0, but you could only control the direct wingmen, like your direct wingmen in your squad, instead of everyone on the in the fight.
So I should explain, I suppose, that you can also command your wingman separately. You can, as far as I know, move your wingman around Shamrock as much as you like. Obviously not as effective as getting the whole battlefield targeting the one thing. So we're just going to be loading up into the new planes, keeping the same weapons from the first mission, is that right?
Yeah, we don't unlock any planes until after mission 4, and we're not gonna buy any until mission 7, when we actually start getting things that are worth getting.
Make sure you have enough credits to buy the planes.
Yeah, that's been an issue I've had a couple of times in my practice runs leading up to this.
Are there like any optional objectives you hit just for money in this route?
Mostly just try and find clusters of enemies when I'm using the rocket launchers. That way I can get a quick buck. Although obviously I'm targeting a few aircraft right now because I want to try and build up 1 point of meter. Now this is easy mode, so I get double ammunition and double meter gain.
So how do you gain meter? Is it based on just targeting time or shooting things down?
Taking things out. Or, as we're going to show in a few later missions, you also earn it by completing operations that your allies have been participating in. You get a huge boost then because, hey, you just freed up a bunch of your allies who can now help you in other parts of the battlefield.
Yeah, that happens a few times throughout the game where you kind of finish one objective and then, you know, you have somebody radioing in saying, "Hi, okay, cool, you've helped us out, we'll help you how we can." It's a nice bit of flexibility, I suppose, for figuring out the routing.
Yeah, and it also helps just do cleanup if something gets missed and you're going like, well, I don't want to go out of my way to go after that. Then you just tell everyone else to go after it.
So what we see in here is pretty much the same thing again. The story here is basically after the Allied military is withdrawn from the capital at the end of the last mission when
Why
you
did
were
I
able
do
to
that?
evacuate. Sorry, go ahead.
Oops.
Ooh. Shame about that.
Oh no.
It's a very easy thing to happen. This isn't too long a mission, so it doesn't matter too much.
So I see that the destroyed planes still have a hitbox in this game. That's
Only the big ones.
that doesn't happen in every Ace Combat. So
That is what you've just seen, everyone here, is a 1 in 10,000 occurrence. That's a rare treat to see something like that. Consider yourselves blessed.
Yeah, I tried finishing it off with guns and then went, oh wait, I gotta pull out of the way.
yeah.
And then didn't.
In some of the Ace Combats, you can do the swag flying through the explosion, especially if it's the final target, and then you get the cinematic of you flying through the explosion, but I guess you can't do that in this one.
I mean, the end cutscene is sort of that, but that's at the end of the game.
Oh yeah, that's always the final cutscene.
The fighters like the Mirage and like the Rafale and all those, you can fly through, but the bigger planes like the bombers, you can't. You'll crash. It's like that in every game. Maybe except for 4, but I'm not sure.
So what we're doing in this mission is, basically there's a big bombing run, loads of bombers coming to try and stop the reorganization and resistance of your allied military in this mission. So you've just been scrambled to go and take out the bombers. That's pretty much it on this mission. We know where we're coming from, so we're going to fly straight there. You'll see Star Pilot occasionally throwing out some missiles at some things that he passes by. Like he explained before, this is to maybe get a few more points, get that allied boost meter moving up.
Yeah, getting 1 bar is useful because there's going to be multiple targets in the final wave, and that can help speed that part up, so you don't have to chase every single one down.
There's also a lot of ESM sites in this mission. If Max, if you want to explain that.
Yeah, I'll do my best. My understanding of how ESM tends to work in these games is that when you're in Allied ESM, which I think in this game has multiple levels, like you have level 1 and level 2 ESM, you get better missile tracking and target lock-on, things like that, and enemies have it worse against you. Have I understood that correctly?
Yeah, that sounds right.
So there are levels of your own ESM. I don't know whether enemy ESM appears in this game or not. I think it does. It certainly appears in 7.
It does, but I don't think it really does anything. I mean, in some of the DLC missions, which you can no longer purchase, it does actually have a strong impact against you, but as far as I can tell in the core game, enemy ESM doesn't really do much.
So you'll see at the bottom of the screen sometimes there's just a little ESM meter. So when you're inside these ESM fields that you'll see on the map, you'll have various better tracking capabilities for your weapons.
Yeah, especially the standard missiles.
Yeah, so you'll see that there's, on the bottom right, you'll see the various stats. You can see the ESM level. We're on easy, so the gun ammunition, the machine gun ammunition is infinite, and we have those 2 below that, the regular missiles, which are quite short range, not too good at turning and getting a hold of people, but you have a lot of them. And then the XMA-4, which are a set of anti-air missiles, which have much greater range, but obviously can only fire at airborne targets. Taking those for this mission for these bombers, because they do significantly more damage than the missiles. I don't know if you know the numbers for that. I don't.
The number for what? Sorry, I was fixing something.
That's okay. Do you know what the difference is in damage between the regular missiles and the XMA-4 or any of the other anti-aircraft missiles?
Oh, I don't know in this game.
So I usually judge it based on like how much damage a missile does. And I'm not sure about the gun, but I think the XMA-4 does like 1.5 to 1.75 times as much as a missile.
Yeah, that sounds about right. but you get a lot fewer of them, and so it can be tougher to. I'm, I'm not okay. Never mind.
The XMA4s have less, but they can also multi-lock, so you can lock up to 4 targets at the same time, unlike the regular missiles.
Yeah, where you can only lock onto one at a time, but you can switch and fire 2 if you're fast enough. So that's the end of the second mission. We're going to try and pretty quickly move into the third one. Any changes to the equipment here?
Yep, we're getting rocket launchers for myself since this is primarily an anti-ground mission. Although I'm keeping Shamrock on anti-air because AI is not too great with ground weapons, especially unguided ones.
So when I've played, I've found that the allies can be pretty good if you can try and focus them on an air target. But whenever there's things like terrain getting in the way, I think that's where they start to struggle. So do you have a particular... This is, I think, the first mission, is that right? Where there's multiple objectives, or am I jumping the gun here?
No, you're right. So we're starting with Quax here since they've got pretty much the fewest targets.
So starting with the one with the fewest targets, is it 2 out of 3 that you need to... 2 out of
In
3
this one,
objectives
yeah.
you need to complete?
Yeah. It is possible to fail objectives, and you won't actually fail the mission if you fail one objective, but you do have to have a quota of objectives that you successfully complete, otherwise you will just outright fail the mission.
So I did see a question in chat, and I'm curious about it a bit myself, because depending on the game, it does different things. What is easy difficulty scale in this game? Does it scale health, or is it just AI?
So I believe
mostly
it doesn't... Yeah, I believe it does a few different things. It certainly affects the amount of damage that you take. And I believe it also affects enemy like anti-aircraft, flak cannon accuracy, and missile fire rate. Increasing the difficulty can also cause different types of enemies to spawn. I can't remember the name of them right now. What are the special named pilots? What do you call those?
The ace pilots?
Yeah, ace pilots. So if you go to increased difficulties, there's more enemies, they last longer, they take more damage, you take more damage. So
Yeah.
if you want to complete the game as fast as you want in a speedrun, then easy is the way to do it. It provides a couple of kind of little safety net things as well, but the main thing, honestly, is the amount of health and damage.
Yeah, there's also 2 missions that it affects as well, as far as like the limits of what you can and can't do. But we'll get to those when that comes up.
Yeah, so you'll see the first use of the super powerful rocket weaponry here. Huge AoE effects that can hit many ground targets at once. You'll see even more impressive use of that later on in the game. And just like that, Mission 3's over. So I believe these are the weapons that we're going to be using for probably most of the missions in the game.
Yeah, until we unlock aircraft that gets cluster bombs.
So these weapons kind of... I guess Ace Combat's kind of known for its crazy kind of ships and weaponry and things like that. Various enormous aircraft and cannons in the different games. There's quite a few pretty silly ones in this game as well, but we are playing New Game rather than New Game Plus, so we are just going with the absolute basics that you start the game with and what you can afford by finishing the missions.
Yeah, there is one weapon there is one aircraft that you unlock that has a multi-lock missile that can target anything, and you have 12 of them that you can fire at once.
Yeah.
But I figured that's probably going to be kind of boring to watch. That's why I'm doing a new game instead.
There definitely are New Game Plus runs of basically most of these games, but doing the New Game version introduces the routing and having to manage your money, and it has the power scaling up as you go. Because most of the games have the one very OP plane that you get in post-game.
which I guess you'll usually get for beating the game on hard or getting a certain amount of medals, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So we see the start of another mission here. This is where it starts getting kind of a little bit more dynamic. There's a lot of stuff going on in the battlefields now. You see cannons firing off bridges, various airborne and ground-targeted enemies, fortifications, all the various factories and things you're supposed to be taking out in this mission. This is basically the start of the counter-attack of your army and your military on the invaders at this point. Going in there, messing up a load of infrastructure.
And this is a pretty common story thread for most of these combats. Starts with a surprise attack, and then you have to start pushing back slowly against them as the story starts to develop.
Mm-hmm. Usually, and the case in this game as well, ending with a large, like a capital city or a huge main battle, followed by something crazy, like the space elevator.
Yeah. Or, you know, whatever special ultimate weapon that you have to fly in by yourself and destroy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, big fan of the ultimate weapons in the Ace Combat universe.
Usually ends with flying down a really narrow hallway to make your escape.
Oh yeah. Kitsune, you're the lore expert here, I believe. Do you want to kind of talk about the background of the Ace Combat series a little bit while some of these enemies are swept up?
Alright. So this game, in the world that Ace Combat takes place in this game takes place in the year 2015. And about 11 years prior to this, there was something called the Ulysses event, where in 1994, they found out an asteroid was going to hit the planet. So everyone started preparing for it, and they determined that the countries Usia, or the continents of Usia and Anea, I think it's Anea, were going to get hit the most. So,
Go ahead.
They determined that Usia was going to get hit really hard, so the main country Usia was the Republic of Central Usia, built a railgun complex called Stonehenge to shoot them down. And then 2 years later, they found out that the asteroid was hollow, and that the asteroid was actually going to have a much more devastating effect and is going to hit the Anian continent. So Slovakia went on the offensive while Grace Maria went on the defensive. Slovakia made a weapon that you'll see later, and Grace Maria made bunkers. Grace Maria ended up getting hit by one of the asteroid fragments, while Slovakia got hit by 8, which destroyed the Slovakian economy and led to massive civil wars, which caused a new regime to rise with high military values, which is what led to Slovakia invading Grace Maria.
Yeah, so I believe that there's a lot of pretty, I guess, grim, kind of gritty story stuff in the background of the otherwise fairly fantastical, kind of wild games. Like, I think is it true that some of the, I don't know if it was Stonehenge or Chandelier or something else, when they attempted to break up the asteroid, when they attempted to deflect the asteroid, they just broke it up and made it do way more damage than it would have done in the first place, right?
They found out that the asteroid was hollow, so how it works is when hollow asteroids hit our atmosphere, they explode and break into smaller fragments on their own.
Uh-huh.
But Erusia finished the Ocean megalith complex and used that to weaponize the fragments of the asteroid still in orbit around the planet Strange Real.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the whole system of the asteroid and the couple different weapons used to fight them was part of 3 or 4 games' main story, and even comes back into Ace Combat 7's story a little bit.
If you look closely, you'll actually find out that the space elevator is made right in the middle of one of the asteroid craters.
Yeah, so I guess strange reel, the world is like a alternate history, alternate geography version of reality, kinda. It's like some of it follows the laws of reality and then some of it deviates pretty wildly from it. There's obviously a lot of pretty obvious references to real world events and things like that, and real world political philosophies, but I find that it touches on them in usually not too like a gratuitous way. It kind of mentions them as justification for the story and not anything, not going any further than that, and I think it finds quite an interesting use for these things. There's quite a lot of interesting ideas explored, I guess. So this is we've already seen the end of the 4th mission now. We are on to the 5th, and this is one of the first really large-scale demolition assault missions where you are attacking a set of oil refineries. Mostly on this mission, is that right?
Yeah, that sounds about right. It's basically to get a beachhead to retake the mainland.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you've got various allies coming in from the sea there. I think there's one naval unit advancing on a oil refinery area, and there's these hovercraft and tanks trying to get to the shore. So that's why he's destroying these sea forts here, trying to clear the way for the allied units to land. As the mission goes on, there'll be various new waves of enemies spawning. Lots of land reinforcements from the back of the map there, and various enemy fighters, AC-130s, those kinds of things. So this is a mission that's like a real slaughter party. Really just get to blow up as much stuff as you like. Makes it very impressive when you clear it as fast as Star Pilot is likely going to here. So again, I don't know if this is anything you know too much about Kitsune, like the background lore of this game with the various different characters that get introduced here. There's a lot of character talk of the kind of background or secondary characters in this game, which kind of sets up some consequences for later on.
What do you mean?
So, man, it's a long time since I've played the hell out of this game, just not recently enough. So there's the tank squad, right? The tank squad that like defects and travels across the country on its own.
Oh
yeah,
starting this mission.
Starpilot, you might actually be able to explain that better than me.
The unit he's talking about, they'll show up in the subtitles as McKnight. They were a tank unit that was supposed to help cover the retreat, but pretty much their entire company got destroyed, and they were the only survivors. So they've folded into the rest of the military, but since they're not officially part of any of them, they're technically still their own battalion, even though it's one tank. They tend to go off and do their own things, and one of them is
in Ace Combat games.
And one of them is pretty greedy and hatches a plan to break into a bank, which ends up saving plot characters.
Mm-hmm. So their plan of stealing military equipment to loot the occupied capital city of their own country actually ends up saving the day.
That sounds about typical Ace Combat storyline right there.
Oh yeah, totally. There's a lot of space for rogue units, rogue characters, people ignoring orders.
Watch out. They got a rock on you from the ground.
I guess it's kind of typical of the series as a whole. So this is the last set of targets before the next waves start coming in from the back of the map, I believe. So as you destroy enemies in different parts of the cities, new groups start opening up.
Yeah, we gotta take out the anti-air guns around the airport, so that way our special forces can recapture it, so we can have an actual airbase on the mainland.
Yeah, so there are, as with some of the other race combat games, there's various ways to kind of restock and refuel. Sometimes there's retreat lines, sometimes there's airports you can drop into to resupply. In some occasions, like this one, I believe, you can overtake them and then your team takes them over and you can land at them. Not sure if that happens in this mission or not, but it definitely happens in some.
It will, but it takes a while. We're probably gonna be almost done with the mission by the time that happens.
Yeah, so a lot of times you do actually have to wait for your allies to physically roll their way across the map to complete things like this.
Yeah, you can see Yellow Jacket right there. They're the ones escorting the capturing units. And since they're helicopters, they're not very fast.
So there's a question that's just appeared in chat here. How did you decide on the routing for this game? Obviously the levels are all in order, but did you do a lot of testing for, identifying which of the objectives amongst each mission would be faster?
Yeah, sort of like just going, okay, what seems like what support would I get from finishing this objective? How many targets? How diverse are those targets? Like in some ways, it might be faster to actually do the airport part first on this mission, but the allies that you get are the helicopters, and they're not fast, so they're never gonna actually ever be in range to help.
There's also consideration of like weapon cooldowns when you're routing Ace Combat games. Just the angle you're flying, and if you have enough time to cycle through all your weapons and take out targets, or if you have to circle around and make another pass, is a big consideration.
So you can see on the bottom right of the screen there that you'll see him swapping between the two weapons, but when the weapons have just been used, you'll see that the missile or bomb symbols are kind of hollowed out and will slowly refill, and once they've refilled you'll be able to fire again. You can see that on the rockets here. So these weapons all have some amount of cooldowns, but you can swap between the various weapons that you use. There's another question. So is there a type of operation which is consistently slower throughout the entire game? So I guess that means like anti-air or anti-naval, those kind of things.
I suppose it'd be the ones where you have to escort a ground unit, because there's one mission later on where you can escort bombers, you can escort ground allies, or you can escort your navy. And the ground units, they have to reach a certain point before it will trigger the second half of the mission. As opposed to the others where they're just going like, okay, we're ready.
In some of the games, when you're escorting air targets, you just have to finish killing all the enemies. Is that how it works in this one, or do you still have to wait for them to reach points?
I mean, if you want to be immersive, you can wait for them to reach points, but if you want to be fast, then it's sort of like, okay, targets exist, go kill the targets.
Yeah. Because one of the biggest parts of Ace Combat routing is just learning where everything spawns, being ready to take it out right as it spawns. It's not always possible given each mission, but when you can, it's really nice.
Yeah, there are times when enemies are there on the map but are untargetable, so you can't lock onto them. I don't think that always means that you can't do damage, but sometimes it often does.
Yeah, some games you can machine gun them while they're not targetable, and that works. In other games, they're just immune. I don't know how it works in 6.
They're actually always vulnerable in this.
Nice.
Oh, really?
You just have to be able to hit them.
Yeah.
Hence why part of the reason why I go with the rocket launcher, because even if it's not an active target, it can help me, take things out, even if I can't lock onto them.
Mm-hmm.
So speaking of escort missions,
yeah, this is probably one of my favorite missions in the entire game. We're finally meeting back up with the mainland military and find that, wow, they are on their last legs. trying to defend a city. And here you come, miraculously, to save them. And then they help you with the general counterattack, both within this specific mission and bolstering your forces for the rest of the campaign.
So how did you find the routing on this particular mission here? Because right now there are 6 different objectives to choose from.
So, okay, so I guess I'll go in reverse order. F, that is only anti-air. It's also the only mission here that is anti-air only. And since taking down planes can take a little longer than taking out ground targets, I figure I should probably avoid that one. E has hardened targets, gun trains specifically, that would take almost an entire salvo from the rocket launcher to go down. So, I mean, that one, it's probably okay, but the reinforcements you get from there are the helicopters again.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, it's sort of like, well, that's not really going to help me on any of the other stuff. D is your airfield, which is a mix of air and ground. And allies you get from those are A-10s, which, I mean, they're okay. But they're still relatively slow compared to other aircraft. So I start with A, mostly because it's the closest one to one of the spawn points that you can choose.
Uh-huh.
And you get Avalanche, who is one of your allied squadrons who's helping you out.
So this is kind of, you've seen a really good example of kind of the core gameplay-based combat being executed very quickly here. You can see the very tight turns, very close to the ground, firing as many salvos of the rockets as possible, and then swapping to the missiles and the machine guns to do the manual cleanup of all the rest of the things. You can take down pretty much all enemies with whatever weapons you can hit them with, so you'll see Star Pilot, once he's swept through with the rockets here, will often do some cleanup with the regular missiles or with the machine gun. And this is really the thing that saves the most time in this game so far, I think, is how well utilized these kind of rocket type and bomb type weapons are.
Yeah, they can take out a lot of things. And when they say anything can be hit by weapons, they mean it. You can actually bomb enemy aircraft that are in the air. You just have to be insanely precise to do it.
Mm-hmm. Not something you can rely on the wingman to do. So you're moving north across the map for the airborne targets now.
Yeah, at this point the enemy is starting to retreat, and there's a few targets in there that I tasked my allies to go after.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're A-10s, and A-10s are relatively slow. So they would take a long time to actually retreat, so I try and get my allies to go after those first. And then these gun trains, they don't move, but they take a lot of firepower to go down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so just cleaning up the last of the gun trains here. This mission will end with a large amount of retreating enemy forces being chased away by the Allied military here. And we have seen the first kind of major use of the Allied attack mode there, and you'll see it's just pressing up on the D-pad when you're facing a group of enemies. You see it again there. You see that some little green arrows appear underneath the targeting boxes of various enemies, and each one of those, I think, is one ally targeting that enemy.
Correct.
And during this kind of special allied attack mode, your allies are much more lethal and much more accurate.
Yeah, because normally the allies, when it comes to air targets, they shoot a lot, but they don't always connect very often.
Yeah, that's actually one of the variants on this specific mission, because there's fighters in the sea mission, but there's only 2 of them, and your allies sometimes take them out before you get there, sometimes they don't. So that's one point of the run where there can be variation.
The threat level for remaining Slovakian forces is down to
Yep,
about
so just
60%.
flying in for the last section of cleanup here. Some very dense units of enemies that would usually be quite tough to take down with non-high explosive weaponry, but since that's what we've got, they end up being taken care of pretty quickly. And the huge blast kind of damage radius of the weapons helps so much with these clusters of ground enemies, because you'll see that what would otherwise take, 10-15 seconds of swapping between each target, strafing along with machine gun fire and waiting for your missiles to reload. Those rockets take them out, and that's the end of the mission.
Yeah, and missiles don't have splash range like rockets do or bombs. So if you were to use only missiles, that part would take much, much longer.
Yeah, especially since the goal is to not have to go along and hit the same group of targets a second time. You want to kill them all in one run, ideally.
Yeah, minimize the amount of time that you have to do to go after them. So now we are actually getting our first new plane. And yay, I have just enough credits for it.
Very good.
I was afraid I might not. If I didn't have enough credits for that, then I would have had to sell the rocket launchers off of the F-16, which then I would have to buy again later. So,
Someone in chat was asking how much you use sound cues, like if there's ever a point where the dialogue is letting you know that something has triggered and that's when you start moving.
I do that in the first mission when you need to know how to retreat. Sort of like when someone goes, "Hey, which way are the missiles coming from?" That's my cue to finally turn away. For the most part, sound cues are going to be more of the missile warnings, or knowing where the script is in the where it is in the mission, because some script lines have to be played through, others don't. So knowing which ones are playing can help. Or like if you decide to go to a return line or restock, if a long line is playing, when you get back to the mission, that line's going to play again.
I can hardly see a thing. We've got mountains right below us. Watch your altitude, Talisman.
Yep, so we are moving into the next mission here. Once again, we'll see 4 objectives. We see Star Pilot flying straight to the north to attack. Is this bombing planes up here?
They're trying to intercept Snakepit, who is a
Yes,
support
interceptors.
aircraft.
Yes,
That is a lot of missiles.
Yep, that was a big selling point of 6. Sort of like, wow, look at how huge these engagements got.
Oh, you know what we've not shown yet? When you get a chance, do the thing where you hold down B and get the cinematic shot of the missiles firing.
Oh, sure.
Just when you get a chance.
Yeah, that'll probably be when I start going after the jammers.
Yeah, so the different objectives in this mission, I believe it's these fighters trying to intercept your radar aerial support, a group of bombers trying to attack your land units, a group of enemy jamming planes, and one more that I've not mentioned. Is it the enemy ESM planes themselves?
It's a... Okay, so one of them is a group of supersonic bombers, and the other is a train of ground attack craft. So, like, you can see on the radar right about now, you can see that there's a bunch of arrows on the south end. They're attacking. Those are the ones that are attacking Warlock. And then Windhover just now said, "Hey, there's bombers heading for Phlox." So those are two separate operations.
Yep, so we've picked a faster plane for this mission, right, to make this kind of flying through these areas a little faster. It's a little bit of a shame of the speed run particularly that you don't get to enjoy, I guess, some of the things that you get to experience casually. It's kind of like that with all games, I suppose, but anyone that's not played this game casually, I suggest doing it, because there's a lot of interesting scenery, interesting missions, very nice, smooth gameplay.
There's a lot of detail in this game. if you get the chance, you should show them the dynamic swept wings for the F-14.
Yeah, I'll do that. And I do not like these extra long XLLAs. They have really poor homing, but since we're doing interceptions on a very large map here, they happen to be one of the better choices.
Yeah, that's the usual trade-off for super long-range missiles in these games.
Yeah, because you'll see that we just had four things targeted. They all missed. Because I was too close.
Yeah, so the special weapons that you get are of pretty varying quality.
Yeah, that's the case in a lot of the Ace Combat games. You learn, especially in routing, that some of them are just way more valuable than others in terms of, like, it might be really good, but some of them just have way more limited ammo and aren't as useful in the speedrun as one that's almost as good as that one, but just has a ton more in usage available.
Yeah, you can see that I tried to use those missiles to catch up on them, because at that point it's sort of like, well, they're faster than me, so I can't reach them, so I'm going to use my long-range missiles to catch them. And how at the shorter ranges that they just kind of ignored it, because they take like 3 seconds to actually start homing.
Yeah, if you're not shooting them at about the max range, they're usually not very good in most of the games. But when you can land them from max range, it can save a bunch of time, because like they're so far out of your normal engagement range.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so you can see on the map in the kind of left side of the screen here the enemy jamming capabilities. The way that you use the map in speedruns is kind of a little bit different to how you'd be using it casually, because you'd be spending a lot more time tracking the planes that are close to you and trying to get in there in a dogfight. Not so much necessary when you know exactly the targets you're going for and when to go for them. Oh, nice. Look at that. That cinematic view there.
Yep, so cinematic they missed.
That was the best part. You did the cinematic view and it just didn't hit.
It's sort of like, oh, I just ran right by it. Oops. Yeah. So this is the only time I use this aircraft and weapon type. Because, you know, again, it's a huge map.
Yeah.
I mean, there are some other large maps, but the targets are closer together in most of them. Alright, I was supposed to show the wings off.
So we have 3 of our objectives complete here. I believe now we're waiting for a certain event to occur.
Mm-hmm.
So, if anybody remembers those fun fireworks from the start of the game, those fun little explosions about to become a little bit less scary.
Less scary?
Sorry.
Yeah, because...
Much more scary is what I meant by that.
Okay, there we go. That was...
More concerning.
Yeah, suddenly, oh, what's all these little aircraft doing here?
Oh,
they don't have
drones.
weapons.
I like Sky Kid's confidence.
Yeah, so this is the first set of drones that we get to see in this game. They're a central feature of Ace Combat 7.
Yeah. Keyword C. They actually do exist in the first mission, and you can gun them down if you want, but that's really impractical. And thanks, Shamrock. Classic Shamrock.
Oh yeah, what was that? The old wingman flying in front of you to block your missile there.
Yeah.
Classic work, really high quality.
He's helping.
I mean,
so much helping.
Shamrock, bless him, tries his best.
I mean, I'd say he's a lot more competent than your wingman in 7R.
Yeah, that's
yeah,
a pretty low bar.
Infinitely.
So the drones that you see in this mission, as you may expect, have significantly better speeds, acceleration, tighter turning circles, generally just do a lot of things that wouldn't be possible in a real plane or even a fictional plane flown by a real fictional person such as the one you're flying here.
Yeah, I was about to say, the normal enemies in Ace Combat games can break physics at times.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, the drones, you see it in a pretty extreme way.
Yeah, so they're vulnerable when they're doing the terminal guidance of the cruise missiles, because that's when they slow down. Which also makes it kind of risky if you have to use shortish range missiles, because the huge explosions of the cruise missiles saw me get tagged a moment ago.
Yep, all of the time that you're trying to have these really close range dogfights with the drones will actually stop, basically still for a little moment in a way that no other planes really can. And whilst doing that, they're essentially acting as the target marker for these cruise missiles. So the game does try and draw you in to get blasted there.
This is reminding me of some of the other games, like the fights with the Yellow Squadron, where you're just fighting these ridiculous enemies and you do your best, and sometimes they behave and sometimes they decide to waste about 5 minutes. Is that about the same case with this mission right here?
Yeah, that's kind of what's happening. This wound up being a little slower than usual.
Yeah, I feel like this is one of the ones where the first time I played this, I pretty much gave up trying to use the lock-on missiles at all and just tried to kill them all with a machine gun.
That sounds incredibly dangerous.
Oh yeah.
There are actually medals / achievements related to doing gun-only runs.
Mm-hmm. Have you guys done those? Out of curiosity?
I haven't done them in the newer ones, but I did them in the older ones that I played so much as a kid. It's
pretty good as the gun-only category for this game. So, I guess the story part of that mission is that this is where things kind of start turning around again. In the Ace Combat games, you'll quite often see several dramatic turns of events with the advantage in the war shifting from one side to the other. That's kind of one of them, where our military gets totally surprised by these cruise missiles, even though they've seen them before.
Yeah, it's because we finally entered the range of the aircraft that happens to launch them.
Yeah, so your army kind of gets messed up a little bit there. There has to be a very fast evacuation whilst your team sorts out the drones and evades cruise missiles, but immediately afterwards, pretty much unimpacted, we're straight back into another assault. I believe this level is the capture of, is it San Loma?
San Loma.
Yep, so I believe this is another one with 3 objectives. One is out at sea, one is the first one we've started along the coast here. You're getting rid of various land and anti-air defences so that your forces can move up. And then there's another one kind of further up the bay where you are letting, is it a hovercraft squadron move in?
Yeah, that's the one that I mentioned earlier, that it's probably faster as far as your performance to do that one.
Mm-hmm.
But then you have to wait for them to actually reach their objective.
Yeah, so there's kind of a lot of different things to consider with the routing, which kind of make it more complicated, which is stuff like Star Pilot was mentioned already, like the speed at which the Allies move at for them to finish their own operations. Obviously, the amount of time it takes to fly yourself between the various operations and how many enemies they are, how tough they are, how evasive and unpredictable they are. Because although things do spawn, lots of enemies tend to spawn in the same place, it's very, very rare that you'll find enemy planes in dogfights acting the same from one attempt to another. There's a point where it seems a lot more random, certainly.
Yeah, I know in the early PS1 games you could actually manipulate it because the AI wasn't as advanced. when I was messing around with Ace Combat 2 speedruns, where you fly this far in, you turn here, hit this grid point, you turn here, and then the enemy planes do what you want. But that's not really the case in the PS2 games and beyond. You just have to be able to adapt to the situation that it gives you.
Yeah, there's a couple of bosses in 7 that you can manipulate if you do it right immediately.
Yeah.
There's a super advanced drone at the end of mission 10 in that uses only guns, but it's super maneuverable, and it will shoot your missiles down out of the sky. So instead, what you do is try and basically get into a head-on fight with it, with one of the, I guess, low-tier planes that happens to have gun pods. Basically, it gives you 3 machine guns instead of 1, and you just damage race it.
Nice. Like equipping the heaviest armor and largest weapon in Dark Souls. Just stand there and exchange punches until someone wins.
Yeah.
I have a friend who did that in...
Sorry, go ahead.
I had a friend who did that in Neo with using like 3 different ways to revive when he died. Same general idea.
We're seeing a major naval assault here. I don't know what it is. I don't know if I'd be interested to see if anyone else has this feeling that the naval battles feel the most satisfying of any battles to me. I really enjoy the naval battles in this game.
Yeah, it's like, if it wasn't super slow, I would have done the naval one on Mission 5 as well. But the fact that... What makes that mission slow there is the fact that it's pretty much entirely air-to-ground for the first half, and they're all incredibly spread out. But in the second half, it's nothing but air targets. So, and unless you're using, the super plane that you unlock for New Game Plus, you're not going to have a weapon that's good for both situations.
I know that in some of the other games, the naval battles can be really fast if you have the right special weapons. It's one of the uses of those super long-range missiles. Did Shamrock do it again?
Literally only 1 rocket got out of that salvo.
Nice.
Wow.
In the same space as you.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's fine work. So we're just seeing a few blasts down at... Is this an airport down here? Do helicopters launch from this place? It is an airstrip, right?
Yeah, we already took out all the aircraft that we're going to try and launch from it.
So that's something you can do in this game when there's enemy aircraft carriers or airstrips. You can try and destroy often all of the planes before they get a chance to take off.
Also notice that it
now
looks
we're
like you're trying to use the allied attack on the airborne units since you've got the rocket launcher.
Yeah,
you
it's
don't
a
have
good
the good special
compliment.
weapon.
Although we also have bombers, and they're really good at taking out clusters of ground units. I mean, when we started the naval system, I targeted the back of the enemy fleet, and the bombers just basically took care of those all on their own.
Yep, so we are seeing the earlier rescued naval fleet Marigold, or Marigold the capital ship, and its fleet moving into the bay here as we clean up the remaining docked enemy fleet in for repairs. And like you said, we'll keep seeing Star Pilot use the allied attack feature to really focus on those enemy fighters that we're not quite as well equipped to deal with this team. And there it is, mission accomplished, just like that.
And for some reason, this city has its own Space Needle. I don't know why. I kind of think it's like a proto-space elevator.
Looks like the CN Tower.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised. There's a lot of the cities in the Ace Combat games, they put in landmarks that are very close to real world landmarks. That's a pretty common thing.
They like to use geoscape data in order to basically easily build, like large areas.
So this was the mission on approach to the The next one, Heavy Command Cruiser Assault on the Aerial Fleet Mission 9. And this is where we get to meet the source of all these nice cruise missile explosions.
Oh, is this the requisite go destroy the enemy superweapon mission?
It's one of them.
One of them, yeah, one of them. So
Now we're finally getting upgrades for Shamrock.
what are you equipping him with here?
XMA4s. Again, you know, just the general. They will hit a lot of targets, air-to-air weapon.
So I'm super excited by this, right? Because I maybe did what could be maybe very generously described as a speed run of this game about 2 years ago. And seeing the difference between how I played this mission and how you've kind of figured out this mission with the rocket weapons, there must be like 5-7 minutes or something
Somewhere
saved
around
in
there,
this
yeah, because the fact that you can just hit their engines all at once, even if they're not active.
I wish
Yeah,
I
I'll
knew that
just hit them
strat when I had the
instantly.
game.
Yeah, so even with the crazy like 12 targets split cluster homing missiles that you and your ally can have at once, it still takes way longer because of the AoE explosions are so large of these rockets here.
Yeah, you're gonna see the support craft for the main aircraft just kind of evaporate.
I think maybe I'm wrong here, but if you zoom out on the map, is this a map where you can see some craters from the Ulysses explosion?
No, those will show up on the final mission.
Uh-huh.
Ameria, as we explained earlier, didn't really get hit too hard by the Ulysses, but Slovakia did. So we'll see some of those impact craters in the final mission.
Oh, what you're seeing on the horizon here, by the way, it's called the Igaion. It's a airborne aircraft carrier fortress with several extremely powerful support craft, which you'll see Star Power often take out in a single volley like he did there. So what these things essentially have is a number of systems attached to them. So some of them have ESM, anti-aircraft weapons, and engines. But if you get a correct enough spray, like you'll repeatedly see Star Pilot doing here, you can destroy pretty much the entirety of the ships just by kind of aiming somewhat centrally and doing some minor adjustments. And that allows this to be cleaned up way faster.
You know, Strange Reel's taxes must be just ridiculous.
Hey, how do you afford all this?
Yeah, they look like just miniature-sized arc birds at this point.
Yeah, so again, this is approaching the capital ship here. The Igaion is covered in various guns. It's got a runway up on the top of it there, which we kind of avoid, or you'll see Star Pilot kind of avoiding, because that's where a lot of the enemy firepower is, but you'll see him slowly weaving up and down and using the rockets to take out first all of the guns and then all of the engines. So here we see an engine just being taken down pretty much instantly, and he'll continue strafing across like that. You'll also see the Strigon team, which is kind of the enemy elite ace team, taking off from here. You've met them a couple of points before. So they're really pulling out all the stops to try and defend this thing, but it's not working out too well for them.
So I found Belka's involvement in this game.
Oh no, what is it?
So, in the previous game, Ace Combat Zero, which is like a prequel to most of the other games, you fight a super bomber called XBO. It turns out the scientists that made a lot of the technology behind that bomber went into making this aircraft.
Yeah, and for context, Belka is sort of the nation that gets used in a lot of the games as the generic bad guys.
They're essentially Germany.
Yeah,
They're
most
kind
of the time.
major recurring antagonists of the series, I guess.
Yeah.
But hey, now they're super planes out of commission.
Yeah, so that thing's in trouble.
As far
Um,
as the PS2 games onward, I think the only ones that they don't have direct involvement in is 4.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And even
actually,
sorry, go ahead.
in this mission, there's some crates that are from Gruner Industries, which is a Belgian company,
Yeah.
showing that hey, they're supplying weapons for a lot of these wars.
Yeah, they do actually lampoon the whole Belka thing a little bit in Ace Combat 7, even while still having it be a major plot point.
Yeah, so the Balkans are like really militaristic and high like science output. I guess it's kind of implied that because they don't care about ethics, they develop a lot of strong, powerful military materials, which then get sold to various other nations. And it seems like Belka are trying to engineer wars to try and weaken their neighbors. That kind of thing.
Yeah, they're story-wise like super nationalistic. They think they're superior and they're upset because they lost a war in the past really badly, so now they just try to set the other nations on each other to get revenge.
So this is a super fun, interesting mission here. Another one with various objectives. You see Windhover and Warlock Battalion and Yellow Jacket, several of your allies that you've met earlier in the game, all advancing on Ragno Fortress. Is that the correct name?
Yeah.
So this is a huge, huge enemy fortress, and this first section here is pretty coordinated. Unfortunately, we just missed that one plane coming through, but there are these enemy kind of units at the bottom of these canyons, these chasms, and then other enemy fighters and bombers, etc., flying through. So you want to try and catch those kind of at certain points when they're flying as close to you as they can to save time rather than you having to chase after them. So you'll kind of blast some of the substations and the main areas around the fortress as you're trying to get these guys as well.
I'd like to point out for casual viewers that what Starpilot is doing with those unguided bombs is incredibly impressive, because he is not aiming these the intended way, and he's using, I assume, practiced lineups to just arc them over a really long distance, way further than you're intended to be able to shoot these, just to take out these targets very far away and just speed up this mission a lot.
Yeah, I was doing the same thing to a degree with the rocket launcher. That's intended for close range, but I was using it more of a mid-range.
Yeah, it's just the unguided bombs do fly at an arc. So the way the game intends you to use them is you get up really high and then you fly down at an angle at the targets and you line up both targeting reticles and it'll be like, hey, that'll hit. Instead, he's just arcing them forward just with knowing that they'll land.
Yeah, so you do get like kind of a visual on where they'll land with the targeting reticule there, but it's so like it varies a lot by very minute changes in the movement of your plane. So very impressive blasting.
Yeah, it's something that I feel like they improved a lot in 7, where they actually gave you more than just the dot.
Yeah.
They also gave you a directional threat indicator for enemy missiles, so that way you know where they're coming from and how close they are, as opposed to in this where you have to look at your radar.
So this is one of the missions where the objective C, I think, here involves flying on the inside of some tunnels and destroying some support columns. Or some
Yeah, that's
enemy
pretty close.
items.
Yeah, you're gonna hear some howitzers coming out. Actually, yeah, they've already spawned, and those are gonna be firing on Warlock. But if you do Mission C fairly quickly, those never show up because
So
their
basically
elevators and stocks have been destroyed.
Yeah, so in and around this fortress, there's these like underground passages, cave, like built-in cave systems, I guess, that they use to transport troops like in secret underground. So that's how they managed to get so many troops in so many places across this battlefield, is using these tunnels. But one of those objectives is going and shutting down the use of those tunnels, so they can't move their troops around properly. But once you've sorted out the first two of those objectives, the final fortress assault will open up, and we'll see Star Pilot dropping some bombs before the targets even appear. So we're about to see a lot of cluster bomb explosions taking out a lot of enemies close to the ground there. Look at that.
Yeah, all the tanks are already gone.
So that's a group of like, I don't know, 16 enemies or something there, and also various pillboxes and bunkers along the wall. A lot of these enemies still, even though they're uneasy, do take quite a few hits, so you'll see a lot of very close approaches this time.
On to the next one. Target coordinates have been sent. This is the last group.
And the last group of targets will finally get lit up on your radar here, appearing in red. Quite often you'll see at the end of the missions here, that allied bar is built up pretty high, so you can kind of spam it every 30 seconds or so to really keep your allies focused going on one thing, but it's very rare that you need more than one set of attacks on one group of enemies.
Yeah, I missed getting a bunch of the Harriers in the first attack, so that's what caused that to drag on a bit. Since, you know, I'm set up for anti-ground, but Harriers are fighters.
So a very quick clearing of the fortress there, and the enemies in retreat.
So, one of the people in chat is asking, how often does the stability of planes come into account for your selection? Like how much you can really ride a plane before it stalls? Or do you just care more about speed and weapon selection?
It's more about speed and weapon selection. Really, only the unlockable super plane is the only one that really has terrible stability. So for a new game run, the stability isn't really a factor.
Yeah, there's some people kind of talking about the physics. It's not exactly a realistic physics game. They do put a decent amount of effort into how the planes kind of control and feel, but it's certainly not meant to be corresponding to real life physics, let's say. But I feel like these things are more important in like casual runs or like trying to do harder difficulties than they are on like the easy speed run.
Yeah.
You'll find a lot more trouble with trying to pull tight maneuvers and do cool stuff in a more casual playthrough than you will in the speed run, which really is about point to point to point, kill things as fast as you can in the simplest, fastest way possible.
Did your scatter bomb take out a plane?
It might have, but I also tasked Shamrock to go after him.
Okay. It looked like he got hit by one of the scatter bombs.
It's possible. It probably wasn't intentional though.
Just a nice little bonus if it happened.
Yeah, like now these AC-130s that are trying to take off, yeah, they're just gone now.
Yep, so another example of the airstrip being hit before the things get to take off, and that's a huge number of enemies taken out straight away. And one objective, one enemy away from being done, something like that.
Yeah, going back to the physics of Ace Combat, there's a fun little exploit with the physics that doesn't become useful in most of the speedruns, but just uses the fact that the way it works is if you fly up near the ceiling of levels and you just stall out on the top of the level repeatedly at a really narrow angle, you can actually gain a huge amount of speed, go way over the max speed of most of the planes. It's been around in most of the Ace Combat games, but it's only useful in very particular missions because it takes so long to get up to the ceiling of a level and really start accelerating that it's got to be a really long flight time for it to save time.
Yeah, I'm just bombing this area even though it has no targets right now because targets will spawn there. So I'm just basically cleaning it up so that way I have fewer targets to cycle through.
So this is kind of the counter-offensive of the war, really kind of racking up in the story section. Do you want to talk about anything to do with what happened in maybe this mission and the one after?
So at this point, we're really close to getting back to our capital that is still occupied. And Slovakia doesn't like that. They're willing to do just about anything in order to, well, I guess not lose. What's happening here is that your military intelligence has found out that Slovakia's got weapons of mass destruction, like nukes or chemical weapons, and they want everyone to retreat and get out of there. But for some reason, Shamrock decides to go, no, I'm going to take these guys out anyways. And first, I don't know why you decide to follow his lead, but you do.
Yeah, so another example of people, military people, disobeying orders in this game. And I think the basis of what Shamrock does in this mission, right, where he ignores the commands and tries to fight the enemy Strigon team.
Yep, it ends up being a 6 versus 2 dogfight.
And yourself and Shamrock get punished for that. The next mission is the famous trench run.
Yep, where you actually
trench run for it.
Where you're going to try and take out their weapons convoy secretly.
That's another staple of Ace Combat games. Have to fly through a narrow canyon to get to an objective at the end. Usually with some sort of surface missile that will shoot you down if you fly out of the canyon.
Oh yes. There's usually a ceiling that you can't go above, or else you'll be detected or shot or whatever.
Yeah.
So here we'll see one of probably the second really serious dogfight of the game after the one with the drones back there. This is 6 members of the enemy Aces, kind of prime team Strigon. Is there any particular tactic you use when you're going after these dudes?
So even though they're supposed to retreat, Snake Pit's still here, so we can take advantage of the ASM to make our weapons a bit more effective. So I try and engage them here as much as I can. And since my aircraft is not quite as maneuverable as theirs, I try and take advantage of my high speed instead to get some distance before I fire off a bunch of missiles to them head on.
So you're kind of flying into your allied ESM, trying to bait them into it and take them all out together.
Yeah, head-on shots is a weird thing in Ace Combat. For some reason in a lot of the games, if you can be flying straight at an enemy and they're flying straight at you, you can just hit them with missiles that normally wouldn't hit in other situations. I know that's used in a couple other boss fights in Ace Combat games.
Yeah.
Trying to bait them into flying straight at you.
It's mostly about I think the enemy's not having as much time to react once the missiles are already in the air. I feel like the AI start reacting a lot more dramatically when a missile is actually on, rather than when you're just locked on.
Yeah.
Yeah, although the AI does try and start doing evasion if you have a lock on them. It's just not nearly as intense as once you've actually fired on them.
Yeah.
You can actually trick them by having a lock on a target that you don't intend to hit, and then just as you're in range, switch to the target that you do want, and they're not going to have time to actually get out of the way.
It's also useful in the higher difficulty runs, like if you're doing Ace difficulty or something like that. Against some of these tough enemies, you can bait them to evade by shooting a single missile, because some of the enemies will evade in a very particular way every time. So you shoot a single missile you know won't hit, and then you track them, and then shoot the ones that you know will hit afterwards, but you don't have to do that as much on the easy speedruns.
Yep, so that's all 6 of the Strigon team down. And the team getting told off a little bit here, your wingman being scolded by the AWACS commander.
So why are you being scolded again?
Because we disobeyed a retreat order. Because they found out that, hey, they're going to use these nukes on our capital. if we keep advancing at the way we are.
But they declined to share that with Shamrock or the player character. You basically get you must retreat right now, even though you're winning this battle massively, and we've told you to go here and win this battle. It's time to go right now, but it's not explained that the reason for that is because, look, they say that they're going to use some chemical weapons or whatever if we don't stop. I feel like if they'd have maybe told Shamrock that particular thing, it might have gone over a little better.
Yeah, that's kind of what I think too. Shamrock just kind of flies off the handle going, I want to see my family again.
At the same time, there's the whole like military sensibility. You were told to retreat, we expect you to retreat.
Of course.
Yeah. So this is one of the missions where difficulty does change it a little bit. The radar ceiling is about 100 meters higher on easy than in all the other difficulties, which means I can take a bit of a straighter route.
And
So-
you're using the metric system, right?
Yeah, I tend to use that since it's easier to divide and all that.
Yeah, so this is the trench run that we mentioned earlier. You have to stay down in the trench because there's some kind of radar which will get you detected, and as you're flying through the canyon here, you're destroying all these watchtowers and guards and things before they can get the message out.
These
That's the
missions
theory anyway.
were always amusing to me because the whole idea of like destroying the watchtowers and everything, or sneaking by the watchtowers, kind of forgets how loud planes are.
Yeah, again, Ace
That's
Combat,
especially in True
not
and 7.
hugely interested in the realities, much more the fantasies.
Yeah.
So normally we want to take everything out, but this final fort, we don't need to bother with it because they still have a 60-second timer. It takes us 20 seconds to get to the catalyst. So we just don't even bother with it.
So that's a pretty significant skip because that's the largest group of those enemies there.
So 60-second timer is like you need to take them out before they alert. But
Yeah,
you just-
if the timer ends, then the mission auto fails.
but you just skip it and kill the main objective instead. Yeah, that's really neat.
And as we pass by that fort, you can actually faintly hear the air raid siren still going off. So now that we've managed to take out the weapons of mass destruction, we gotta get out of here.
You'll have time to celebrate once you're back.
Yeah.
But as you can see on the radar, they're not gonna let us leave.
Enemy forces are still in the vicinity.
Yeah, and this is probably the biggest dogfight in the game. The most aerial enemies that you'll see at any point, I expect. So what Star Pilot's going to try to do here, I believe there's multiple things that can kind of trigger the advancement of the mission. One of those is killing a certain amount of enemies, one of those is a certain amount of time passing, and one of those is getting so far west on the map.
Yeah. It's hard to get the kills one on New Game because your weapons are relatively limited as opposed to New Game Plus where you have the 12 missiles. I'm going to delete 12 things now.
Yeah,
So I mean, I try and take things out, but I'm pretty sure I don't actually hit that quota. But hey, everything.
More kills generally means more credits. Makes money routing easier anyway. Are you at a point where money is just not a problem anymore, or are you still actually...
Yeah, we're already at the final aircraft that we're going to use. Because, I mean, it's like the F-22 would probably be pretty good, but we only have it for 2 missions, so why even bother getting it?
Especially in RTA runs where the amount of time spent buying, unlocking, and equipping the plane has to be accounted for.
So there's a question in chat right now about whether the other multi-lock missiles are this accurate. The end-game multi-lock missiles are significantly easier to hit than probably any of the weapons that we're using in this one, because they fire a very long way away from your plane, kind of from the top and bottom, and then spread out and move in from there. We've got a very interesting firing and homing mechanism that makes them very reliable. So yeah, a lot of high drama in this mission, a huge amount of enemies. Whatever are we going to do about them all? It just seems unfathomable that we could kill this many enemies.
Oh, we can try. We can certainly try.
I mean, it seems like a fair fight.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, it's what, 2 on, like, 40 or something?
Oh yeah.
I think you need more than that for it to be a fair fight against Star Pilot, TBH.
Talisman, you have a bandit on your tail.
Yeah, so we see again, when the cooldown of the special weapon is kind of ticking away, we'll see a swap to the missiles and a few gunshots and missile shots, and then you'll see another turn back around for another volley, and that really is kind of at the core of the Ace Combat gameplay. It's balancing how you move around in the air and of your enemies, and the cooldowns and the ability to use your weapons at different distances. It's kind of the core gameplay. And oh, well, isn't that just in time? It's a huge number of allied fighters. It was really looking shaky for you there, Star Pilot. I'm glad these guys showed up.
Yeah, it's not like I didn't take, like, 80 of them down already.
It was close. It was biting my nails.
Yeah. Thing is, with this mission, there's immortal F-15s that you can't take out. Your allies have to. I think they just do that so that way, it's sort of like, hey, your allies actually helped a lot.
Is that you can't do damage to them, or you'll never hit them?
You can damage them, but they won't run out of age. Sort of a plot armor thing.
Yeah. Because in some of the other games, there's definitely enemies you're not supposed to be able to shoot down, but with some interesting tactics you can. Just because they made it so, like, they dodge so well that they didn't think you'd ever be able to hit them.
All enemy fighters have been destroyed. Well done.
And that is cleanup and redemption of Garuda Squadron.
Looks like you still got a loan to pay off.
Didn't take long. So we're on to 3 remaining missions left, and this is kind of what it's all been leading up to. The big one, the liberation of the capital city that we lost in Mission 1, Grace Maria.
All planes get back to base. Next up is Grace Maria.
Yeah, this is another... You have a bunch of different forces that you have to deal with, and a bunch of allied forces to help you with. There's 6 objectives. We need to finish 4 of them.
And you just saw a little glimpse of the madness that's developed in the cutscenes there. Man,
Yeah.
I wouldn't know where to start explaining this stuff. Kitsune, what's going on underground there? For now, it will remain a mystery.
All planes, commence with mission.
So
No, I can explain it a little bit. So, the kids that were there, they're basically kids that are still in the city and actively resisting occupation, and they have an underground hideout. But when they were building all of these fortifications here, it triggered ancient trap door, which got them locked in. And one of the Slovakian officials that was on site, they had some of their documents stolen by the kids, so they chased after him to try and get him back. And that's who the guy in the cap was.
Did you say the phrase "trapped by an Incan trapdoor"?
Ancient.
Oh,
Although
okay.
Incan could probably work too.
So essentially the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's this kind of a tough, old, like, Slovakian veteran dude that kind of takes pity on the children of the city and ends up hiding out with them underground. And I think ends up passing on some vital intelligence that lets you deal with the chandelier right at the end, right?
Yep.
That's who this dude is. Do you want to talk about kind of the objective order on this mission here?
So I try and get the airport first, so that way I have the ability to change weapons whenever I need to, which won't be until actually we basically start the second half, but it's better than going to the return line that's all the way on the west side. And then next I go after the Navy, because they have ESM, and that helps out a lot. Especially when we get to the second half of the mission.
Yeah, so what you want to be able to do here is clear out the enemy navy so that your Marigold can move into the bay once again and provide you with ESM. And whilst they're providing you with that ESM, I think there's 2 more objectives for you to do in the bay.
Yeah, the other ground missions on the east side of the city did points that take a while to actually activate. So I do the air targets instead, since those are always exist.
Yeah, so also those ones on the east side of the city, there's a lot of kind of enemies on top of or between buildings, things that are very easy to miss. I don't know how much that matters with the cluster bombs. That's the Navy almost completely taken care of already.
Well, at least outside the bay. There's gotta be another wave that comes in. The ones that were stationed, that were docked, they're finally showing up. They got aircraft carrier, they got battleships, they got missile cruisers.
Yeah, and at least I think two aircraft carriers, something like that. Maybe just the one.
It's just the one. But still, it's something that you need to take out quick, so that way they don't launch additional aircraft.
Do the additional aircraft turn into targets, or are they just things that chase you around them?
They're just things that chase you around.
So you can see how many ESM things, or jammers rather, radar jammers we've got left to deal with on the radar there. In a casual run, it's very, I feel like people would often end up going for those first and getting lost in the mist trying to find them.
Yeah, it's why they have the bunch of letters below the radar. You can hit left and right on the D-pad, so that way you can filter things out. Focus on a specific operation.
So, as usual, we hear kind of a lot of city chatter. There's a lot of backstory, as I said, that gets kind of told in the radio chatter and various other things. So you're hearing various kind of snippets of conversation between, like, the local police and enemy radio, allied radio, the different units on your team, and also from these, like, underground bullion stealing people's child smuggling folk.
Yeah, and the ESM that's here, this is above your operational ceiling. You can't easily reach it with standard missiles. You can try, but they're probably not going to hit, so that's something that I make sure my allies go after.
So do the allies have an increased or an unlimited attack range?
I believe that they have better attack range than you do with their missiles, and the power of them actually seems to be a bit stronger. Because like way back in Mission 2, they could one-shot the bombers that you had to two-shot.
So the Objective in the bay being cleaned up. Operation E.
Hmm?
And after a short delay here, we're going to meet our, I suppose, main rival as an individual in the game.
Yep. He's the one who's using their super fighter. And you guys are going to get to see just how nuts those multi-lock missiles that we've been talking about earlier are.
Oh yeah.
It
So
also
apart from
happens to support itself with a bunch of UAVs that will just chase you down.
yeah, and all of these things have like hyper good turn speed, acceleration, deceleration.
Yeah, you'll probably see Pasternak do some pretzels or something in the air. Like
Yeah,
literally doing a pretzel shape in the air.
the big one-on-one fight with the enemy superplane is something they've been doing in the more recent Ace Combat games. It's kind of a new staple they've introduced in the last 3 or so.
Yeah, so we landed to swap weapons to anti-air weapons here, right?
Mm-hmm. And Pasternak, I'm not sure if his ESM does anything other than let you know where he is. But he is in a stealth plane, so if he gets behind you, you're gonna lose your lock, and you're gonna end up targeting UAV instead.
Yeah, so
We
I
can
feel
s-
like when I was attempting this mission, it could be anything between like this section could be anything between like 30 seconds and 5 minutes.
Yeah, it depends on how lucky you are and how aggressive you can be without getting hit by all of the missiles.
So, thankfully, you do have a pretty large amount of allied cover at this point, but it's not always particularly effective at hitting the very elusive targets like Pasternak here.
And even if it does
Nice.
hit, they
Just sort
don't
of
really
head
do
on
a whole lot of damage.
Something
Thanks,
kind of
UAV, for
abusing
flying
the-
into that.
Yeah, it's kind of abusing the hitbox of the enemies when you fly really close to them like that, and because there's basically no way that they can turn to get out of the way. It's a nice way to guarantee some damage if you can get in that close. Because even on easy, this guy takes
A long
how
game.
many missiles would you say?
I've never really counted. Mostly because most of the missiles end up targeting the UAVs.
Mm-hmm.
Can't match its turning rate, so I gotta try and do something else.
So while Star Palette is fighting this interestingly physicsed enemy, I saw a question in chat about what Disability Month is. We just did an event benefiting able gamers, and October is Disability Awareness Month. So in kind of extending from that, we are just showcasing a bunch of speedruns by disabled speedrunners, showing that, you know, everybody can speedrun. If you think you can't get interested in speedrunning because of problems that you may have, you can definitely look up Able Gamers. They do a lot of work in helping people get accessibility options or special tech to continue playing video games. Really worthwhile charity. And if you'd like to participate, you can do ! Disability Month in chat. There's a form you can fill out.
So that is the old Grace Maria liberation mission over there. The next mission has like quite a few minutes of basically just dialogue whilst doing a patrol around the city. So if there's anything else you want to talk about to do with the event, perhaps your schedule going forwards, now is a really good time to do that.
Yeah, probably just the quick note that Hotfix is funded in part thanks to subscriptions and bits. So thank you everybody who's tuned in today. So if you would consider subscribing, it helps fund future broadcasts like this. And of course, tomorrow we're going to have the first episode of The First Step. But that's going to be preceded by a run of Titanfall 2 by Game On 18, starting at 5:30 p.m. Eastern. So definitely check in for that tomorrow.
Garuda team, time to take off.
And of
So
course, sorry, go ahead.
So with the disability bit, how I fit into this is I have Asperger's syndrome, which is a relatively high functioning form of autism. So, like, some days I can function pretty well, some days I can't.
Stand by over the castle. Wait for Garuda 2's takeoff.
Yeah, I really should have thought this out better. Like, we tend to have like pretty good intelligence, but we also tend to like things to be very samey. So, you know, having the same meal every day, having the same routine. We tend to also be very sensitive to distractions. So, like in my case, whenever there's a motorcycle going by outside, it's just like one of the worst things I can feel, that other than, you know, being like physically ill. But I mean, that's part of life, and you gotta learn how to filter that stuff out. Like, so when I was growing up in grade school, I was regularly testing like 4 to 6 grades above my current grade on a lot of things. But I also had terrible grades because I would always forget that homework was a thing. Because it didn't really register as something important to do.
Duty is to fly over the capital.
And then because of like the strain of trying to grow up and all that, it took me 5 years to get through high school, 4-year high school, and 6 years to get a 4-year bachelor's degree, which unfortunately I have managed to do nothing because there just weren't any jobs in the area, and also by the time I was getting by the end of the degree, I was realizing I'm not good at handling like syntax, small changes with how programming works. So it's like I understand it basically, but the stuff to actually get it working, I'm not so great at.
Garuda team, head for the southern part of
So what we're seeing here is a party, a nice fireworks display. Surely us being in our planes over the city, whilst this big party's happening, couldn't possibly mean that there's anything bad about to go down. Does anyone else have a feeling like there's something bad about to happen?
Reminds me of a certain stadium mission in Ace Combat 5.
I think if that mission is anything to go by, I think this just goes swimmingly. Perfect.
Yeah, clearly
Absolutely.
nothing bad can happen.
This is the happy ending.
No one wants to watch you stinking up the sky, Avalanche.
There is an Easter egg that I'm going to show in a little bit once a bit of script finishes up, which incidentally is also close to our objective is going to be. So it kind of works out pretty well.
Garuda 1 and 2, get to the castle.
So this is also where Shamrock gets very sad, finds out unfortunately about the loss of his family, and kind of rages out in the cockpit.
Pass over the castle.
Quite lucky for him, I suppose, that there's a distraction in the form of several cruise missiles flying towards the city at this very moment that you can now see Star Pilot heading towards the locations of once he's finished the patrol.
Yep. The Easter egg is on 2 of the buildings here. So this game was published by Namco Bandai. Hey, there's Pac-Man.
My wife and daughter, both dead.
There's a Dig Dug enemy.
I saved my country, but I lost my family.
That's great.
He didn't even protect his own family.
Yeah, there's a bunch of other Easter eggs. Like, actually, if you were listening to the chatter,
Jessica.
this goes out to Dominic and Tank Battalion. Marie has a little message for you. That's nod to Gears of War, which was also on the Xbox 360, since Dominic was one of the main characters, and Marie was his wife.
Dominic Santiago, I think. His wife met a very dramatic end, which I won't talk about, but happens in Gears of War 2.
Oh yeah, that was actually a rather emotional bit.
Ooh, yeah.
I've confirmed an unknown
Grim.
radar.
Powerful. very grim.
It's traveling too fast.
So,
But that's not ace
oh,
combat.
Oh no, I'm flying towards the city.
Northeast, all
What could that be?
formation.
We're in the middle of
Ruh-roh.
celebrations.
The unknown just jumped off radar.
So remember when we talked about the
Objects are traveling on the same
meteor and
these are.
the weapons that nations had built to try and shoot it down?
All planes intercept.
Slovakia built one of those, but it never got completed. And that's what's firing at us right now.
Second wave of unknowns
So what we're seeing is like giant cruise missile shells which split up close to impact into lots of separate missiles.
unknown destroyed, but we've got a whole
And when they pop onto radar for us here is when they split up. So you have like a moment to see where these things are coming from. Once you've played the game enough times, of course you know where they're going to come from, but now several other fighter planes just spawn into the map.
Yeah,
They're not
Slovakia is
told
not
so you
finished
can
with us.
ignore them.
At least it's not like other cruise missile missions where if you're too close to them when you blow them up, you die.
Yeah.
That's a classic in Ace Combat.
So the order of these missiles is a little bit randomized, so there's a little bit of RNG as far as how fast you can get this done or not. I mean, they're always going to be in the same spot. It's just the order that they decide to get fired in.
So I think you and I had a conversation about it the other day, but I don't know if you ever got the test. My belief is people are asking in chat. You are not able to shoot down the cruise missile containers here. I don't know if that's been tested by anyone recently.
Yeah, I mean, if I have been on a perfect intercept course with them, I've tried gunning them down, but I haven't registered any damage or anything as far as I can tell.
Mm-hmm.
It may
Cuttlefish
even-
asked about the RNG
Possibly, but
variants for the cruise missiles.
We would of course welcome anybody else to jump into the game and have a go. Maybe try your hand at the speed run.
I think that question by Cuttlefish is, oh, how much the RNG variance, like, affects the end time of the mission.
It is probably only like 30 seconds to a minute. It's not huge. It's just, how much do you have to chase them down, or how convenient are they going to be nearby?
How much you have to backtrack to get to the next one.
Yeah, and you can see the huge amounts of like stealth fighters appearing around you, so you really have these dudes chasing you around for the whole mission. Thankfully, you have the allied cover feature, which can take some attention away from you. So, somebody asking what the world record is. Star Power himself has the record here. What's your current record time?
It's 1:47:22. 1 hour 47 minutes.
So that's the new game category which we're running at the moment. I believe you also have a special new game run.
Yeah, that's, I think, about 1 hour 36 minutes.
So not that much difference in the grand scheme of things between the two times.
Yeah, actually, when I submitted this, my about 1 hour 58 minutes. But once I was noted, hey, can you do this for us? Sort of like, oh, okay. So I've been practicing a lot and managed to shave 11 minutes off of the record.
Nice.
And I'm pretty sure it's possible to get it below 1 hour 45 minutes. I'm just not sure how practical it would be. Since this is very performance dependent. If you goof up on 1 or 2 strafing runs, then you're going to add another 10-20 seconds to your run.
Well, then there's also variants and stuff like the drone fights where they can be a little bit trolly and just add time to your run.
Yeah, because they're deciding to go, no, I'm just going to keep be behind this entire... We're about to have the final salvo of missiles come in, and there's a bunch of them.
Yeah, I think it's like how many sets appear in this wave here?
Well, so 3 main warheads come, and I think it's like 13 individual missiles in each one. The total number of missiles at the end is 99.
If you were running the special new game category, would you use
Target down.
out of interest?
You cut out
You
a little
cut
bit
out.
there. What? Nexus?
Hello, yes, sorry.
I think he was going to be asking about what using the 12-shot missiles, how different that would be, and you can take out most of these in a single salvo, as opposed to having to go through like 2 or 3 passes. I mean, you're not going to get all of these with the 12-shot missile, but you can gun down the rest of them. They're pretty easy. Occasionally, these things will juke. Doesn't happen often, but sometimes you'll have ones where they actually act a bit like a fighter and try and avoid you as much as possible. And when they talk about stealth fighter attacks on the city, they actually do mean it, because there's so many anti-air guns and radars in this mission, and if those all go down, it actually can extend the mission time a little bit, because of the script going, hey, we gotta inform you that there's no defenses left. And that script will delay everything else.
Target down.
So we're seeing the final run toward the set of missiles here. And straight after this, we'll be closing into the final mission. Chandelier, is that the name of the final mission?
Yep. Where they have this gigantic railgun that, as we said, originally to take out the Ulysses meteor, and it's set up in a remote glacier region. But yeah, Slovakians have decided to weaponize it, and we just defended our city from their attacks with that.
From the ocean.
And that attack has renewed Shamrock's resolve to get this finished. Because earlier he's doing like, I'm not doing this anymore, but now it's sort of like, I've got to protect everything. So there's about, I don't know, 2 minutes of just going at the start of this. So we can probably start closing things out.
Towser, how about my weapon? Garuda team, time to take off.
Oh yes, the medium-sized island that is in between us and the chandelier happens to have some of the impact craters from the Ulysses, which, you know, we never really saw them while fighting through Ameria, because it didn't really impact Ameria that much, but Estevania hammered by it.
Yep, so we are flying way up into the Arctic wastes, basically, here. Which I think is actually justified in the lore by being that this weapon actually needs the cooling of the cold environment to operate.
Yep, because railguns require a lot of energy and heat. In fact, once in a little bit, we'll hear the enemy comms go, recovered to Optimus, resume launching. Because it's been, I don't know, like half a day since the attack that during the celebration.
Yep.
And here comes the island that has a couple impact craters in it.
So what we're flying towards here, the final super weapon, the railgun,
I better contact Grace Maria base.
it's going to attempt to continue firing on Grace Maria as you're approaching here, and you have to try and disable it before it destroys it completely, because of course now you're not back over there to shoot down the cruise missiles.
And surprise, there's still some Strigon here.
Mm-hmm.
They're gonna defend it to the death.
Yeah, so this thing is absolutely caked in, covered in anti-aircraft defenses. It's like, I don't know if you counted them, like 40 anti-aircraft guns, several ships full of flaks and surface-to-air missiles, and elite enemy fighter units launching from within.
And those are the ones that your radar picks up. There's actually a bunch more that you can bomb on the structure of the chandelier itself.
Mm-hmm.
Ma'am, how did you get a hold of this?
Yeah, so as you're flying past the kind of substructures here, you'll see a lot of the flashing muzzle flash of cannons.
Roger. All planes, I'm sending you data concerning the enemy's weapon
There you go, you can see all that there. Those things aren't even up for grabs.
All planes, let's move out.
But now, thanks to the kid who got rescued by the bank robbers, we have the intel we need to take this out.
Yep, so here we have all the separate weak point cooling units. Still got to fly pretty close and take a lot of potential anti-aircraft fire, but there's quite a smooth pattern that Star Pilot's figured out here to try and clear out the last sections of shielding in as fewer turns as possible.
Yeah, if I do it really well, the chandelier never gets a shot off.
So it is right at the front of the cannon here. There's like there's basically another trench where these cruise missiles will be loaded along towards the gun before they get shot out. You can actually destroy them whilst they're in there, but Star Pilot usually manages to do this so fast that it gets done before a single one of those gets taken to the chamber, so none gets fired and you don't need to destroy any.
Yeah, they're about to start the countdown right as I'm getting to the last one. Oh, well, I guess you guys don't get to see it fire. Which is a shame, because it actually looks...
Yeah, it is a cool animation. So that is all of the cooling units destroyed.
Or is it?
Ruh-roh. It's got a backup unit.
What a twist. I never would have guessed this knowing Ace Combat games.
You can see the anti-air fire.
It looks really impressive from a distance.
Yeah, it's like they were firing at us while we were out. That's how desperate they are to keep this up.
Oh yeah, they're firing all on approach as you're battling in various areas. Are those guns vulnerable whilst they're
not yet? They will be, but not yet. It's got to be after Shamrock decides to go, hey, I'm going to try and confirm this intel.
I believe the proper term is Leroy Jenkins.
Yeah, that's pretty close.
Shamrock, respond! Marcus!
Yep, so you see a skipped out cutscene there where your precious wingman Shamrock flies his way straight into the cooling unit. And you need to follow him in there. You do see him actually crashing into the ocean. You need to go in and take out that cooling unit. There it is, all the way inside. Fly through those 8 anti-aircraft guns there. You can see Star Pilot a moment for him to concentrate, making a very fast approach through, and the cooling unit gone just like that. Surely that must be the end of it, right?
Well, we didn't get the trademark end of Ace Combat cinematic, so I'm assuming not.
Yep,
So
at the end they decide that, hey, we're just going to let the air cool, so we're going to open it up, and that exposes its core.
Time to fly down the barrel.
And time.
Congratulations, Star Pilot. That's a solid run within time.
Mm-hmm.
How does this compare to the record once again?
So
Not
this
that far.
this was almost exactly 10 minutes slower.
So we will manage to see a little bit of the closing cutscene of the chandelier fall there. Anyone want to shout anything out before we pass back over to Rilken?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask you guys if you have any shoutouts you'd like to give.
Shout out to Shamrock, who's actually competent wingman.
It's rare in these
Even-
games.
Even though he does also run into your shots.
Shout out to, importantly, the GDQ and GDQ hotfix staff getting these things set up, supporting able gamers. A very worthy and good cause. I urge everyone here to support them. Thank you, of course, everyone for tuning in and supporting us. Little shout out from me to the Super Happy Casual Club. Anything to add?
I mean, I'd just like to say thanks to Star Pilot for coming on and doing this run.
Yep, thanks, Star Pilot. Very impressive. Glad to see somebody as qualified as yourself coming to the game I like so much.
Yep. I got a bunch of the DLC that used to be there too. Unfortunately, you can't get that DLC yet because the marketplace for that closed. So that's actually one of the restrictions I'm doing here. Because you can see that I, in a way, had all the planes unlocked. Those are all the skins that I had bought in the past. So at any time, I could have used any of those aircraft, but that wouldn't be fair to anyone who never got the DLC and no longer can. So we just use the stock planes.
Yeah, I would encourage anybody that wants to try out running the Ace Combat games. We have a little Discord server. Check out the speedruns.com for records on the whole series. It's not a massively, I suppose, challenging game to get yourself introduced to, because you don't have to mess with any kind of finicky little glitches, anything like that. There's no clipping. It is kind of a quite a purist test of skill, I suppose, for a speedrunning game. And there's always people that will help you out. There's a lot of other people that are interested. And yeah, I think that's us pretty much covered. Railcon, anything else you want to say?
All right. I just wanted to say thanks to everyone who tuned in, and of course to Star Pilot, Maxis on Fire, and Kitsune for helping out today. Before we sign out, just a quick reminder, games list for HDQ is going to be out on the 6th. Registration the day after that on the 7th. Tomorrow we've got a speed run of Titanfall 2 by Game On 18 at 5:30 p.m. Eastern. So tune in for that, and then immediately after that is going to be the first episode of The First Step, and that'll be worth checking out as well. But thank you everybody who tuned in. We are going to send you along on a raid to someone else who's speedrunning, so give them some energy, cheer them along, wish them good luck, and we'll catch you tomorrow.